one little quick thing, because I know I'll get nailed for it after church. Tomorrow, Sue and I celebrate our 41st anniversary. I lived through it. Yeah, June wanted me to make sure, like Steve did, to let you know that during between services to come up and grab a pastry and shake a hand. I said, just make sure you don't grab the hands that got the pastry. So, please join us up here. She came in last night and set it up. It's all set for St. Patrick's Day. So, anyhow, how many of you ever noticed that airlines have some crazy rules? And the way they set their airfares sometimes defies comprehension also. Back in February, in fact it was February 12, 2019, I read where the Lufthansa Airlines was suing a passenger because he didn't complete the flight that he had booked. Did you read that? Well, on CNN, it seems that the passengers have found a way to beat some of these high prices that the airlines are now charging. This follows along another lawsuit by United Airlines and Obits, because it seems like they want to recoup like $75,000 in lost revenue because of a website called Smitley. Y'all heard of it? No. They want to nail them for unfair competition and promoting strictly prohibited travel. Seems the person at the center of this controversy is a 22-year-old originally from Bangladesh. His name is Akatar Zaman, and he's the founder of the website Smitley. Now, Zaman knew that at some point in time it was inevitable that a lawsuit would probably be filed. There's nothing criminal about what he's doing, but it's driving the airlines nuts. And they begin to do what they call a kind of roll call of sorts after a layover to make sure that if you're supposed to be on that next leg of the plane, you're physically present. So it never did before. Now, Zaman doesn't make any profit off the website. All he's doing is helping travelers get the best price by exposing an inefficiency in airline prices that insiders have known for decades. In fact, this is referred to as hidden city ticketing. And it's been around for quite a while, just not very accessible to the average consumer. Now, the practice involves a passenger leaving for their journey point of a layover point, instead of making the final destination. So, now, you probably haven't heard how this thing works. You look like, what's he talking about? Well, here's what happens. According to CNN, an unnamed male passenger booked a return flight from Oslo to Seattle, which had a layover in Frankfurt. The passenger used all the legs of the outbound flight, but did not catch the flight from Frankfurt to Oslo's return. He instead flew on a separate Lufthansa reservation from Frankfurt to Berlin. Now, Lufthansa is seeking compensation for $2,385, which is the difference in the two flights. See what they're doing? But a Berlin court threw the case out in December 2018, and the airline has appealed it, according to CNN. So, as far as the United Airlines and Obits case in 2015, a judge from the Northern District Court of Illinois said he didn't have jurisdiction because Zaman didn't live or do business in the city. Now, it's not a bad way if you want to save yourself several $100s. So here's what happens. Let's say you book a flight from Dayton to, say, Los Angeles, California, for the cheap price of $109 one way with a layover in Denver, which is where you really want to go. Okay? So you book that cheap flight for $109 to Los Angeles, but you have a layover in Denver, which is where your actual destination is going. So you don't make the rest of the flight. Because if you went from Dayton to Los Angeles, you're being charged $300 one way, hypothetically, which means you just saved yourself $191 for that flight. Now you all write this down. Remember it next time we'll take an airplane ride. That's what's happening. You're booking for the cheapest flight, even though it goes further, but that layover is the city you want, so that's when you get off and you save money. But it's going to be interesting if Lufthansa Airlines wins that appeal over that $2,385 compensation they seek. So in reality, when you think about it, they're going to lose a whole lot more money taking that dude back to court. They should probably just take their lumps and think about how they're charging passengers. What a crazy system. Hope maybe all the airlines will re-examine how they're charging their customers. But who knows? Usually it pays in life to know your destination before you set out on your journey. You need to know and need to have a goal and know how you intend to reach that goal. James S. Hewitt, editor of the Wheaton Tyndale House Publishers Incorporated, in Illustrations Unlimited, shared a story about how Ray Stedman of Peninsula Bible Church in Palo Alto, California, once asked a 9-year-old boy what he wanted to be when he grew up. And the boy answered, a returned missionary. The boy totally overlooked the years of graduate study, not only the years of separation from home and loved ones. He skipped over the months and years of steamy jungles and parched deserts. He went straight to the final state of recognition and acclaim. But it's hard to skip over the preliminaries and still reach a final goal. Like the musicians' fingers, they exercise their fingers. Olympic athletes do daily push-ups. And Christians' daily stint in the prayer book closet can't be bypassed. Anyone who pursues a goal must be committed to the disciplines that achievement requires. It's like after hearing a famous pianist, the lady said to him, I would give anything to be able to play like that. He replied, I'll bet you wouldn't give 5 minutes a day. Another said to the master musician, I'd give my very life if I could play the way you do. The musician replied, that is precisely what it cost me, my life. In setting goals for yourself, it pays to know where you are going. In our scripture this morning, Jesus knows where he is going. He probably never had a set of written goals. But there was a hesitation. There was no hesitation about where he would end up. In today's lesson, Jesus' eyes are set on Jerusalem, the holy city. The Pharisees weren't interested in protecting Jesus from danger. They were actually trying to set him up so they could trap him themselves. The Pharisees urged Jesus to leave because they wanted to stop him from going to Jerusalem. Not because they feared Herod. But Jesus' life, work, and death were not to be determined by Herod or the Pharisees. His life was planned and directed by God himself. And his mission would unfold in God's time and according to God's plan. That was his destiny, and thus his destination. This was God's will for his life. He knew what it would mean to go to Jerusalem. He tells us in this passage, surely no prophet can die outside Jerusalem. Jesus knew that going to Jerusalem would be fatal for him. Yet he never turned back. He was committed. He was courageous. Most importantly, he cared too much to turn back. And for whom did he care? I'm glad you asked. He cared, first of all, for all the people of Jerusalem. Remember, they said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you, how often I've longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Jesus is willing to make a fool of himself to get our attention here. He likens himself to a hen, to a chicken. Of all the animals out of the ark, Jesus could have chosen, he chose a chicken. He could have chosen a powerful eagle. Out of the book of Exodus 19:4, I bore you on eagle's wings. There's a cagey leopard prowling through the pages of Hosea 13:7. God is likened to a lion elsewhere. But a chicken? Really? Come on. What kind of confidence does a chicken instill upon anybody? When we say there's children out the screen door to face the perils of this world, wouldn't you prefer God the raving lion at your child's side rather than Jesus, the mother hen? Mickey Anders' Fox and the Hen says today's passage almost feels like Aesop's fable, when barnyard animals are playing a starring role. In a short space of 5 verses, we find pictures of both the fox and a hen. Herod is a fox. Jesus, he says he feels like a mother hen. And the people in Jerusalem are all the little chicks running around in great danger. There's no proverb that warns the fox in charge of the hen house. We might use that expression. We put oil companies in charge of making sure we don't price gouge during oil crisis. There's a fox in charge of the hen house. Jesus described Herod as a fox. A fascinating choice. I'm sure that Herod would have preferred a nobler mascot. A fox is an animal known for its cunningness, its craftiness, and its slyness. A fox will prey on the young of others. And Herod could be just that ruthless. As we see the fate of John the Baptist, Herod is a symbol of raw political power. But why a hen? Why not a lion? King of the jungle. Why not an eagle? Why not a mighty warrior on a white horse from Revelation? Why we want to hear about the one whose eyes are like flames of fire, and with the armies of heaven following him. We want to hear about the sword that comes from his mouth and strikes the nations. He says, I prefer to tell you a story of victory and conquest. I even want to say that the hen is victorious over the fox. In the end, it's true. But first, he has to die. Well-known preacher Barbara Brown Taylor says, Jesus won't be king of the jungle in this or any other story. What he will be is a mother hen who stands between the chicks and those who mean to do them harm. She has no fangs, no claws, no rippling muscles. All she has is her willingness to shield her babies with her own body. If the fox wants them, he will have to kill her first. Jesus became the suffering servant and lived a life of self-sacrifice. And he calls us to do the same as well. Jesus loved the people of Jerusalem, but he couldn't help them if they rejected the message he came to bring. On that day long ago, all he could do was weep for the city. Bishop Hazen Werner once told about a doctor who years ago called a specialist in a town 50 to 60 miles away. The doctor told a specialist about a young boy who was critically ill. The boy contracted such an infection that it was causing him to hemorrhage internally. He said, I don't know how to deal with this infection, the first doctor said, but you do. This is your area of specialty. Can you come at once? The specialist said, I'm on my way. He jumped in his car and headed toward the hospital where the young boy lay. And reaching the outskirts of his own town, he had to stop at a traffic light. Suddenly his car door was yanked open, and a man wearing a gray cap and a brown leather jacket, holding a very intimidating revolver, shouted at him, get out of the car. The doctor said, I can't get out. You see, I'm trying, and the man stopped him in the middle of his conversation. I don't care what you're going to do or where you're trying to go. Get out of that car, I'll kill you. The doctor got out of the car. The man in the gray cap and the brown leather jacket jumped into the car, drove off at high speed. The doctor tried desperately to find a telephone since cell phones weren't in at that point in time. After trying 4 or 5 homes where nobody was there, he finally found someone who allowed him to call a taxi. He took the taxi to the bus station. He boarded a bus, and finally he got to his intended destination. But he was 2 hours later than he had planned. The doctor met him at the door. He said, "I'm glad you came, but you're too late. The boy died 20 minutes ago." Maybe if you hadn't been delayed, you could have saved him. And the doctor said to the specialist, "I would like for you to come and meet the boy's mother and father. The father's pretty hysterical with grief. Maybe you could say something to comfort him." As they entered the family waiting room, the doctor saw the father wearing a gray cap and brown leather jacket. It was a man who stole his car. In a hurry to get to the hospital, the father had shut out of the car the one man who could save his son. The people of Israel made that same mistake. They rejected the one man who could save them. And thus Jesus wept. But please don't regard Jesus' tears as a sign of weakness. Can you imagine the courage it took for him to go to Jerusalem, knowing in advance that he would die there? In the booklet, Today in the World, September 1989, page 19, A.W. Tozar wrote, "The meek man is not a human mouse afflicted with a sense of his own inferiority. Rather, he may be in his moral life as bold as a lion and as strong as Samson. But he has stopped being fooled about himself. He's accepted God's estimate of his own life. He knows he is weak and helpless, as God declared him to be. But paradoxically, he knows at the same time that he is in the sight of God of more importance than angels. In himself, nothing. In God, everything." That's his motto. 33 years old. Still a young man with amazing promise. A possible world of adventure lay before him. He could have literally had it all, with no pain. But he turned his back on pleasures that could have been his in order to bear witness in Jerusalem to his Father's love. Weak people offer up bluster, threats, and words of intimidation. A truly strong man looks death in the face and gives his or her life for the cause that's bigger than themselves. The lyrics of some of our hymns are so misleading. Jesus, gentle, meek, and mild. But one thing Jesus was not was meek and mild. Brian Chappell, in a resource for pastors, tells the story which he heard 2 missionaries tell. Paul and Carolyn London are missionaries in Sudan, one of the most dangerous places on earth. And Paul says that in part of Africa, the strongest man in the tribe is the chief. And you might think this is because the chief wears a very large headdress and heavy ceremonial robes. But Paul says that's not the reason. He says water is very scarce where these people live. So they have to dig deep wells. These are not wells as we know them, with brick walls and a pulley and a bucket at the end of a rope. The African people sink a narrow well shaft about 100 foot down in the ground. Even though the well is deep, the groundwater of that dry land seeps very slowly into it. There's never a drop to waste. In fact, if the water were to easily be reached, the people might have not used it sparingly. Or an enemy might have stolen the next day's supply of water during the night. So these tribesmen cut alternating slits into the wall of the well all the way down into the water. And by alternating his weight one leg to the other, man could use these slits to step down the shaft to the water. And only the largest and strongest man can make this arduous climb down the well. and back up again with a full water skin for the whole tribe. Well, one day a man carrying the water out of the well shaft fell and broke his leg. He lay at the bottom of the well. No one dared to help him because no one had the strength to make the climb carrying the man back up. So the chief was summoned. And when he saw the plight of the injured man, he doffed his massive headdress and took off his robes and then climbed down into the well. He took the weight of that man on himself and brought the man to safety. The chief did what no one else could do. The chief had to be strong. The welfare of the tribe depended on it. Jesus wept that day as he looked over Jerusalem, not because he was weak, but because he was magnificently strong. He cared for the people of Jerusalem. He'd gladly have carried them out of the well if they would let him. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, he cried. You kill the prophets and stone those sent to you. How often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. And you are not willing. You know, I wonder if Jesus doesn't weep over our land today as he did over the land so long ago. For certainly we are just as far from serving God in our daily lives as they were then. Jesus set his eyes toward Jerusalem because he cared for Jerusalem. But it wasn't because he just cared for Jerusalem. Jesus cares for every man, woman, young person, and child on this earth, no matter where they live or even who they may worship. One of the mistakes many of the religious people of Jesus' time made was they thought that God loved them alone. They believed that there was something special about their tribe that made God love them more than other people. Of course, there are people in every tribe who believe that about their own people. This is why human history is most often told in the great wars that we fought. The Jewish people looked at themselves as God's own people, and at some point they're right. But it was not because God loved them more than anybody else. It was because God had given them a special task. They were to show forth God's divine purpose for his world. They were to be the light to the nations of the world, but they wanted the spotlight, not to be the searchlight, seeking to save the lost. Jesus set his eyes toward Jerusalem because he loved his own people, but also because he loves every person on this planet. And that, of course, means he loves you and me. Speaker Ron Hutchcraft tells about a news story that gained worldwide attention a few years ago. In fact, it was April 25th, 2015. It was an earthquake that rocked the mountain kingdom of Nepal. Nearly 9,000 people lost their lives, he reported. Many more found their world, their homes, after their very lives wiped away. There were some who survived the quake. He continues, but they faced the prospect of dying in the aftermath. For example, there were climbers on Mount Everest trapped on the mountain by massive avalanches. 18 of them died when part of Everest collapsed on their base camp. There were 140 survivors climbing, but they couldn't get down through the escape route because it was impossibly blocked by fallen rocks. As the time passed, their food was running out and their water was running out. But then when they looked at the fact they could perish, they heard this wondrous sound in the sky. It was helicopters. One after another of these helicopters somehow landed on that mountain, saving those climbers, taking them off two at a time. Then there was that 27-year-old man named Rashid, who was trapped beneath a collapsed hotel, lying amidst a stench of dead bodies for 82 hours under mountains of concrete. He was running out of hope. Then after 10 hours of digging, rescuers broke through. He's alive. The climbers are alive. why? Because the rescuers came. 1 6-letter word, Hutchcraft said. That was the difference between life and death for men on that mountain and the man in that road. 1 6-letter word. Rescue. Hope in Nepal, says Hutchcraft, dependent on, and is in so many ways, so many disasters, a rescuer from above. Now Hutchcraft says this where the news story intersects my life and yours. Because hope for us also depends on a rescuer from above. At the spiritual crossroad of our lives, we were trapped in a place where we would have died, except our rescuer came, Jesus. The one called Savior by millions of people around the world. That Savior as a rescue. In fact, the Bible says in Galatians 1:3, Jesus gave his life for our sins in order to rescue us, not to start a religion, not to be an example or a teacher, but to rescue us. So it isn't about a religion called Christianity. It's about a rescuer named Jesus. He came to rescue us at the cost of his life. He set his eyes toward Jerusalem. He knew the fate that awaited him. But he didn't hesitate. And why? Because he was committed. Because he was courageous. But more than that, because he cared deeply. He cared for Jerusalem. Even more importantly, he cared for the world that his Father created out of love. And that means it was because he cared for you and me. Gregory of Nazianzus in 381 AD asked, who is Jesus? And the answer was these words. He began his ministry by being hungry, yet he's the bread of life. Jesus ended his earthly ministry by being thirsty, yet he's the living water. Jesus was weary, yet he is our rest. Jesus paid tribute, yet he is the king. Jesus was accused of having a demon, yet he cast out demons. Jesus wept, yet he wipes away our tears. Jesus was sold for 30 pieces of silver, yet he redeemed the world. Jesus was brought as a lamb to the slaughter, yet he's the good shepherd. And Jesus died, yet his death, he destroyed the power of death. Is this Jesus truly the master of your life?